morning. I'm Jean Patterson, a member of the congregation, and it's my privilege to welcome you all here to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. We're a little bit cooler outside today, but we still got our fans on in here, so hope you'll all be comfortable. And I would like to, at this time, welcome any guests or visitors. If you're a guest or a visitor, please stand, tell us your name and where you're from. Yes. Welcome. We're glad you're with us today. Yeah.
I'm here with my wife Anne and my daughters Hilda and Kate. We're local here in Kansas City. We do a lot of your
Great, great. Yes.
I'm Elaine, and I'm from Liberty. I'm Miranda. I'm from
Seattle, okay. Just visiting here in town? Hope you enjoy your stay. Glad you're with us. Yes.
I'm Marcus. I'm local here, and I'm the community organizer for Monster.
Yes, and we'll be hearing more from Marcus later. Anybody else? Did I miss anybody? Well, we're very glad you all are with us, and those of you who are watching us online. And Anthony has another introduction.
Good morning. I'm Anthony Edwards, and I'm the music director here at All Souls. I'm so excited to have with us this morning Taylor Jennings, who will be singing Defying Gravity later for us in the service. She's a middle school drama teacher at Raytown, and we're so excited to have her help me welcome Taylor.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Jordinn Nelson Long. That Reverend, I always like to remind you, is thanks in large part to the care and effort of you, the people of All Souls. I am now serving as the lead minister of the Unitarian Universalist Society of Fairhaven, Massachusetts, where I am told it is much cooler at this time of year. It's always a pleasure to be back with you. We are going to connect this morning with some history. Your history and my history and our shared history as people of progressive faith, as people who carry the label and the legacy of Unitarian Universalism forward. How many of you, just wave your hands at me, how many of you live in Kansas? Okay. How many of you hail from Kansas? You were born or raised there, a lot of people. Okay. With apologies to you Missouri folk, this story this morning is centered just on the other side of the state line. But I will tell you that as people of liberal faith, as inheritors of the powerful Unitarian legacy on the prairie, this is all of our story. Make no mistake about that. So whether you are a jayhawk or a tiger or some other creature altogether, this story has something to offer now. What I am about to read, it's a poem, but I invite you to think of it as something more. It was on the order of a commissioned fight song, if you will. It was back in the early 1850s, 200 years after the Puritan colonization of Massachusetts. A small, determined group of people, Unitarians and Congregationalists, left New England to settle the Kansas Territory in the year after the Kansas-Nebraska Act, in the lead-up, and they knew then that it was likely to be the lead-up to the American Civil War. So this morning we are going to take a closer look at those people and at the set of actions, the set of values, and also, I assure you, at the theology that underpins this piece of history. Sometimes it's pretty problematic. And the idea here is that when we begin with careful planning and remember a shared aim, that we go somewhere together. And so for now, we are going to set the scene and settle in for the journey with the words from the Kansas Emigrants. It's Emigrants with an E, by John Greenleaf Whittier. We cross the prairie as of old, the pilgrims crossed the sea, to make the West as they, the East, the homeland of the free. We go to rear a wall of men on freedom's southern line and plant beside the cotton tree the rugged northern pine. We're flowing from our native hills as our free rivers flow. The blessing of our motherland is on us as we go. We go to plant her common schools on distant prairie swells and give the Sabbaths of the wild the music of her bells. Upbearing like the ark of old, the Bible in our van, we go to test the truth of God against the fraud of man. No pause nor rest, save where the streams that feed the Kansas run, save where our pilgrim gonfalon shall flout the setting sun. We'll tread the prairie, as of old our fathers sailed the sea, and make the West as they the East, the homestead of the free. Welcome to worship.
Good morning, my name is Khalil, and I light this chalice for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Thank you. And now I invite you to rise and join in speaking our words of covenant, words that I tell my own congregation, join and bind us with congregations all across this land on this morning. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now we lift our voices with Love Will Guide Us.
Jesus, guide us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace and stride us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
I'd like to invite the young, or perhaps the merely young at heart, to join us for our Time for All Ages. Good morning, good morning. How are you? Having a good summer? So, a truth about our Time for All Ages is that it is to connect you with this place and with this faith, and it is to connect you with this place and with this faith, to speak to us in different words and in different ways than we ordinarily move during this worship hour, knowing that our hearts and our minds and our bodies have all different ways of learning. So I invite you to know that this is for you too, and to consider these words. Good morning. Hi. Do any of you play a sport or play an instrument? Yeah? And how about you? Do any of you play a sport or play an instrument? Yeah? If you're watching online, I invite you to think about that question. How did you learn to play your sport or your instrument?
I played piano lessons, and every week I practice so I can learn from my teacher, Miss Diane.
Awesome. So there are a couple of answers that we are lifting up this morning, and you have just hit on both of them, so thank you. We have teachers and guides who help us learn, who help us decide what page we want to be on together, and we practice. And so I have a story for us all about a person named Kai who had been told by a beloved teacher that they would be able to help their village if they could just find the stone of intention. For the stone of intention allows the recipient to make a wish and enable their wishes to come true in the service of love. That sounds pretty great, right? And the teacher told Kai, you will know that you have found the correct stone because it will feel warm in your hand. When you pick it up, you will feel energy, as if it's reaching out for you. And it is somewhere here on this beach among all of the other stones that look just like it. The stone of intention was lost long ago. And so Kai began searching, looking, and Kai had to make a plan because there were so many stones on this beach. And what if Kai picked one up and then set it down and then kept picking up and setting down the same stones again and again? So Kai pondered this problem and then looked out over the water. And what would you guess that Kai decided to do with the stones that Kai had already tried?
He would maybe mark it or something, or put it in a different pile.
Those are all great strategies that Kai considered. But Kai decided that they might be tricked by the piles or forget because all of the stones look the same. And so Kai decided ultimately that they had to do something else. And so Kai threw the stones into the sea. Can you imagine that? Kai would pick up a stone and hold it. And how is it supposed to feel if it's the stone of intention? Warm. And so Kai would pick up a stone and it didn't feel warm. And so Kai would throw it into the sea. And would you guess that Kai did this a few times or a lot of times? Kai Kai did this for so many days that Kai forgot any other job that Kai had ever had, picking up stones and throwing them, perfecting the ark. Kai got really good, not just at picking up stones, but at throwing them for distance. And then, when Kai had almost forgotten why they were on the beach in the first place, Kai picked up the stone, and it was warm in Kai's hand. And what would you guess Kai did? He threw the stone into the sea. Kai threw the stone into the sea. And we don't know. We don't know what happens next in this story. Perhaps Kai is a really good swimmer and could follow that ark all the way out. This story is given to us to remind us that in our moments where we are working to get toward our goal, not to lose sight of the intention we were holding together in the first place. Not to lose sight of the muscles and practices and skills that are going to help us, not just along the way, but to realize when we have gotten there. And so thinking about those muscles and also those shared goals this morning, we will now sing you to your religious education classes. Thank you.
May love guide all your ways. Beauty be the blessing of your nights and days. Truth on your lips and kindness in your deeds. Faith to follow where the human spirit leads.
Now, as you know, we share our offering with organizations around town that agree with our mission, share our visions. And today we have someone with us from More Squared. This is Marcus Wynn, and he will introduce the offering for us. Marcus.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to join you this morning. I am happy to see a lot of familiar faces. I know All Souls has been very involved with More Squared in the time that I've been part of More Squared. And I want to thank you for both your financial support as well as your physical presence in a lot of our spaces. I am the community organizer with a focus specifically on the Kansas side of the region, yet we do know in light of many of the events in the news these days that many of our borders are arbitrarily drawn. And so it's a pleasure to be on this side of the border and to be with people of faith in Missouri. More Squared is an interfaith coalition of congregations that share the values of social justice, and we organize around those shared values. In Kansas, we are starting a new effort that is based in integrated voter engagement. All that means is we are basing the issues that we're pursuing on relationship building throughout the community. We have a long history in Kansas. We've worked on Lamont McIntyre's case. Many people know that name. We recently were present when Governor Collier signed a bill to provide compensation for exonerees that were wrongfully incarcerated in Kansas. It's one of the most progressive bills in the nation. And just this week, we signed on as a partner organization and a coalition to pass a safe and welcoming ordinance in Wyandotte County. Basically, what that would do is provide a clear directive and binding directive to the unified government that would prohibit it from spending any public dollars in support of enforcing federal immigration law. We're really excited about that. Yeah, thank you. It's certainly not a replacement for the comprehensive federal legislation that we need, but it would make a difference in people's daily lives in Wyandotte County. Thank you for your support. If you have questions, I'll stick around after the service. I also encourage you, there are things going on here in Missouri that are really important. I know there's a Pledge to Vote station in the lobby. If you are in Missouri and can pledge to support some of the really important initiatives on the ballot, both in August and November, I encourage you to do so. And thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And now the offering will be given and gratefully received.
Turn the other way, look around. Something big's about to happen.
Nadja, hallo. Hallo. Alex. Gut. So sein gut. Hinter dir steht eine Herrenfigur, so wie sie eingesetzt wird, tatsächlich. Und nehmen jetzt all die Maße an, die wir brauchen zur Herstellung, wo es abweicht, damit wir sie wiederum produzieren, beziehungsweise modellieren und bauen können. Was ist
Ich denke, es ist schon ziemlich schwierig.
our act of joining together to resist injustice. By these acts, our spirits have fallen into communion. We've fallen into communion with the feisty, free-spirited Puritans of 450 years ago who advocated freedom of religious conscience and resisted the oppressive powers of church and state. We've fallen into communion with the people who believed that revelation is not sealed. We've fallen into communion with the sweet-spirited Universalists of old, who rejected a notion of God as tyrant ruling by the threat of hell, and named God as a gracious, creative presence who saves all through the power of love. We've fallen into communion with the deep-feeling transcendentalists, insisting that religion cannot be found in the dry bones of the past, but must be discovered at first hand. We've fallen into communion with the Iowa Sisterhood and all those women and men who have argued and advocated for the rights and full humanity of women. We've fallen into communion with the all-embracing mystics who see truth manifest in the diverse religious traditions of Earth's people and mysteries revealed in the trees and the stars. And we've fallen into communion with courageous humanists who dare to lift up the dignity and strength of human beings, the power and importance of critical reason in a world that prefers the abrogation of human agency and uncritical obedience to false gods. We live within this communion of souls and receive the beauty given to us by their lives, so clearly linked with ours. This is the covenant we are already in. I suggest that what we have received from this covenant is most of all membership in a community of resistance to oppression. Let us wake up into the dream they dreamed of abundant life for all, and in our time, put into practice the way of life that will embody the realization of that dream.
Something has changed within me. Something is not the same. I'm through with playing by the rules of someone else's game. Too late for second guessing. Too late to go back to sleep. It's time to trust my instincts, close my eyes, and leap. It's time to try defying gravity. I think I'll try defying gravity, and you can't pull me down. I'm through accepting limits, 'cause someone says they're so. Some things I cannot change, but till I try, I'll never know. Too long I've been afraid of losing love. I guess I'm lost. Well, if that's love, it comes at much too high of cost. I'd sooner buy defying gravity. Kiss me goodbye, I'm defying gravity, and you can't pull me down. Unlimited, just had a vision, almost like a prophecy. I know it sounds truly crazy, and true, the vision's hazy, but I swear someday I'll be up in the sky, defying gravity. I'm flying high, defying gravity, and you can't pull me down. So if you can't find me, look to the western sky. As someone's told me lately, everyone deserves a chance to fly. And if I'm flying so low, at least I'm flying free. To those who drowned me, take a message back from me. Tell them how I am defying gravity. I'm flying high, defying gravity, and soon I'll match them in renown. And nobody in all of us, no wizard that there is or was, is ever gonna bring me down. Whoa.
Thank you, Taylor. Sermon's been preached. Jerry Coleman McGee's sport of choice, which he has been practicing for more than 3 decades, is rock skipping. He is the world record holder since 1992 for the number of consecutive skips. 88, in case you're wondering. You can, I now know, skip stones on lakes, on the ocean, on rivers. You can apparently skip them on sand. You can, I hear, skip them across a cloth covering an antique dining table, but do not, and I am looking at my own child, try this at home. Skipping stones makes them appear to dance across a surface. The rock descends in an arc, makes contact, pops back up again, makes contact, then up again. Repeating this pattern as far as momentum will carry it. Selecting a good stone helps. It should be flatter than this one, about the size of the palm of your hand, with a heft no more than a tennis ball. The real secret of stone skipping, though, is spin and speed, both of which must be imparted before the rock ever leaves your hand. The secret of stone skipping is preparation for the event. Working together, spin and speed, and if you came here specifically for the secret, I'm told it is throwing at a 20-degree angle to the surface of the water. Working together, these things allow a stone to defy gravity. Eventually, the drag of the water on the rock wins. The stone is dragged beneath the surface. All good things must end. But before that, magic. In 1854, the first organized group of abolitionist settlers from New England arrived in Kansas. They immediately founded the town of Lawrence, choosing Massachusetts as the name of the main drag. This was not an accident. They are both honoring their motherland and invoking a powerful legacy, one that has shaped our nation before, and they aim to do it again. Church, schools, a free and politically engaged press are established within 2 years. Their newspaper is called the Herald of Freedom. They found what will become the University of Kansas on a land grant from the Unitarian who becomes the first governor. And here, too, with this institution, their aims are not meager. These fiercely devoted dreamers intend to recreate the best of what they have known. Public institutions, public good. If you have ever heard KU referred to tongue-in-cheek as the Harvard on the Caw, you should know that originally that was no joke. It was precisely the intent. They aimed high, these 19th century prairie colonists, and their achievements made history for faith and for freedom. 3 states in the Union have had Unitarian governors in their history. One in living memory of some of us is Adlai Stevenson of Illinois. The other 2 are Massachusetts and Kansas. These latter 2 states have been tied together for centuries in ways that neither now remembers well enough to name. But the history is right under our noses. Modern-day archaeologists in Kansas found tinned clams, lots of them, when they excavated not only Lawrence, but the historic town site here in the Kansas City metro of Quindaro. Knowing and loving some Massachusetts Unitarians as I do, that fact amuses me to no end. There is indeed much to smile at and a lot to be fiercely proud of in the story of these ancestors, and we do indeed inherit their legacy, with whom we have fallen into communion. And there are lessons for us as well. The emigrants brought their culture with them, and they brought their cultural expectations. Things about class, race, land, about narrative and history, and how we should use words and for what purpose. We, presently, as a movement, have begun to question some of these historically rooted cultural expectations, and for good reason. And I will be honest, as a young woman minister in a historic pulpit, I am beginning to question some of those things as well. I have had to laugh, in fact, in that an unexpected experience of 4 years spent researching the history of Unitarianism here in this region is spending an incredible amount of my time reading writing by white men in their 40s and 50s and 60s. It has, in fact, meant steeping myself in their ways of seeing the world, their conceptions of right and wrong, their dreams for America. It's tiring. If that demographic I just mentioned is you, here in this era, I will answer the question. Yes, you still have a place, including here. Yes, you are still beloved, but you don't get to be the only people. and you don't even get to expect to be first. We are going to let those who haven't had space even to dream do some imagining for us all. Because here is the thing. It was not ever true, not ever, that classically educated white men were the only people to think or to dream. They are not even the only people to have written, but by and large, it is generations of white men who represent the only words that collectively were thought important enough to preserve. Reality as it then existed chose their words to keep for us. And then their words, having been selected for the keeping, have gone on and on and on to frame realities. Remember that. It's a truth. And here is another one. There was colonialism aplenty in the Massachusetts to Kansas venture. This was a conquest of land, pure and simple, backed by a narrative of right for faith and freedom, and a supply chain of might. Think lawyers, guns, and money, and not necessarily in that order. And the endeavor was backed from the beginning by racism. The South did not ever hold a monopoly on that. We know that it does not now. We understand ever more deeply that we continue to deal with the fallout. A permanent ward of the state view of people of color underpinned the imaginings of our religious ancestors. Fear of brown skin defined their worldview. There were calls from Unitarians for a separate peace and for further colonial initiatives. Let's send people of color to Grenada, an actual idea funded by the federal government, put forward by our Unitarian forebears. It died a very quiet death when the government of Grenada pointed out that they were interested in continuing to govern themselves. These things are true and hard to countenance. And it's an even bigger ask of our hearts to hold these truths while still acknowledging that these people, your Unitarian ancestors, they accomplished something real in the world. They and their families and their money and their faith, Kansas became a free state, one fiercely devoted until very recently, and do not let recent events obscure the commitments of history, fiercely devoted to free education and free press. This land, this region that you share, literally the prairie next door to you and the forests and fields beyond, these are what they fought for. Free soil in the name of a larger love. It's hard to remember in the label of flyover country, in the era of what's the matter with Kansas. And let me tell you, the next New Englander who asks me with an air of superiority whether I happen to have read that book, so help me. But here is the thing. In the years plural, before the Civil War, you need to know that Kansas is the name on every breath. Not just Charles Robinson and Ephraim Newt and Samuel Pomeroy, those Unitarians and leaders actually in the territory. I am talking about Emerson, Tyler, Lincoln. Those people are writing and theorizing and waiting anxiously for the next dispatch from Lawrence. And meanwhile, people are massacred here in Lawrence, but also in Westport, and beaten savagely in Boston in Kansas's name. in some of your names, in our collective name, that we might all grow to be more free. This commitment, declaring it necessary and doing what it took to live it out, even when it meant sometimes death and deprivation. These were tinned clam people, and some nights they ended up eating dust for dinner. It was brave as hell. And it was also tremendously ethically complicated, and it remains so to this day. The Kansas emigration movement was a moral action in the context of a nation brought to the brink of epic bloodshed over the question of human enslavement in the name of economic gain. It was an immoral set of actions in a larger context. Both the legacy and rights of the First Nations peoples, the Delaware, the Wyandot, the Kansa, that were swept under the carpet of our memories. And in the context of the things we know now about genocide and structural racism, from which we cannot, must not look away. In some real ways, these folks, our forebears, got it wrong. We enjoy the fruits of freedom, but unequally, and the labor continues to name and to clean up that mess. And you know this. We Unitarian Universalists continue to do powerful justice-seeking work in our movement, and we still get it wrong sometimes. May this knowledge make us humble. May our determination to remake the world, to assist in the arc toward justice. Theodore Parker, originator of that phrase, that vision, he too was a supporter of fledgling Kansas, and it was in that era and in support of this cause in which he spoke those famous words. Let us wake again and again into the dream they dreamed. Let us learn to be skippers of stones ourselves, defiers of gravity who know where we come from, who have the courage to remember and hold the complexity of it all, that we might choose to carefully aim, cultivate muscle memory toward magic in where we might choose to go next. I want to note in that song, and thank you so much for bringing it to us, Taylor, that song from the musical Wicked, as in the Kansas territory 2 centuries ago. Defying gravity is dangerous. If Elphaba chooses to fly, she will be discovered. She'll be seen for the magical talent that she is, and yet, not for herself alone, but for what a people might yet become together, she rises and claims, as we all must in every era, that sometimes it is worth the risk. And so I ask you, individually, but even more so as a community of shared faith, where do you have spin and speed as you move through this world, through this discouraging and urgent moment? Where do we as a denomination, we as the current face of Unitarian Universalism, have the skills to do something necessary, something incandescent? Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and we all get free together. These words, these concepts advanced by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and lately by white Unitarian organizer Chris crass, and so many working in service of the same movement, one of whom is my friend and colleague, the Reverend Teresa Soto. She is a poet, a minister, a lawyer. I want to tell you a story. And I notice that I have just misgendered Teresa. Teresa goes by they. And even in this, we are going to model continuing together until we get it right. Teresa was offered an internship at one of our flagship congregations. Teresa moved across the country at personal expense and hardship, only to learn when they arrived in the city that the offer had been rescinded. Not because of anything that Teresa had done, because upon a scant amount of reflection on the fact that Teresa lives with cerebral palsy, has lived with cerebral palsy from the moment that they were first upon this earth, because Teresa uses a scooter for mobility and the chancel involved several stairs, that the internship would not be possible. A conversation, an invitation, a request for collaborative problem solving, those did not manifest in the moment. Simply a decision made on behalf of someone else in the name of our movement, a yes turning to a no. Convenience. I bring this up as we consider history and legacy and the urgent call of now, because just as they were 200 years ago, people's bodies are a site, a location of control. And that truth affects voice, it affects participation. And we have to realize and move forward in the commitment to naming that it was never about bodies or even about buildings. It is, and it has always been about power and about participation. Who do we recognize as human enough to trust with some of our shared power? I want to be clear. This is not about those other people. This is not me standing here lecturing you even. I will tell you, I have all of this living in my own heart. Exclusion and control are games I have learned to play. I know all the rules. Perhaps you do as well. Faith, hope, and love come harder. Take carefully cultivated practice to notice when they are glowing warm in the palm of our hands. And so I have to ask myself, in my ministry, as Brian Stevenson, death penalty defense attorney, asked us as a movement in the Where lecture at General Assembly last year, I have to ask, where is the love of finality overcoming my faith? Where is the comfort of an easy no blocking the way to a maybe? Where is the attachment to a particular way of doing process thwarting our progress toward love? Which brings me back to that Pro Infirmis video. It's from Switzerland. If I say the words throwing stones, we might immediately think about bringing people down. But this is a service about bettering our aim so that we can lift one another. Lift what is truly human. Lift again what is remarkable, what is worth risking ourselves for, just a bit higher. This is a service about breaking free of what holds us back, not because we subscribed just once to magical thinking, but because we know in faith, the magic that can happen when we get creative together, looking for ways to say yes to the largest love we know. The 3/5 clause was in play in the early days of Kansas. Some persons were displaced in the era of the Kansas immigrants, and this is Reverend Teresa's wording and their genius. Some people were displaced then so that a different kind of person could be seen as people. Scarcity mentality in action. We'll make space for you, but someone else has to go over here. There is a similar kind of math, my friends, happening in this moment around disability and ability and space making. As Teresa says, if I am invited in the door but I cannot pee, how much of a person do I count as? If my body is left out of worship imagery in the place where we gather to do the work of the holy, what are we saying together? What reality are our words creating as those generations of white men's words are creating for me? What words are we now creating for Teresa's body? There has always been a math to personhood. This is the logic of choosing finality, and it makes a commodity of love. It makes a scarcity of accessibility. It makes a mockery of our faith. As the late poet and activist Laura Hershey wrote in Translating the Crip, which I am excerpting here, but which I commend unto you in all of its fiery entirety. Can I translate myself to you? Do I need to? Do I want to? When I say disability, I mean all the brilliant ways we get through the planned fractures of this world. When I say living in America today, I mean thriving and unwelcome. The irony of the only possible time and place. When I say cure, I mean erase. I mean eradicate the miracle of error. When I say safe, I mean no pill, no certified agency, no danger to myself, court order, no supervisory setting, no nurse can protect or defend or save me if you deny me power. When I say public transportation, I mean we all pay, we all ride, we all wait as long as necessary. When I say non-disabled privilege, I mean members only thought process and the violence of stairs. By dancing, I mean, of course, dancing. We dance without coordination or hearing because music wells through walls. You're invited, but don't do us any favors. When I say anything, I know the risk. You will accuse me of courage. I know your language all too well, steeped in its syntax of overcoming adversity and limited resources. When I say courage, I mean you sitting next to me, talking, both of us refusing to compare or hate ourselves. When I say ally, I mean I'll get back to you, and you better be there. And so we are asked again and again, and now we are asked to move differently. And there is fear here from those of us who are comfortable, myself among them. We want access to space. We want access to metaphor. Underneath that, we don't want to be scrubbed from the stories in which we see ourselves reflected. Fear takes lives. But here is an option rooted in faith. What if we let our fear be a point of empathy? We don't want to experience what those other people we imagine are experiencing. So let us use our own bodies, our own voices, our own dreams, our own witness, our own love. Let us truly move on the side of love to change for everyone the possibility. We have work to do now and again. And I hope, oh Missourians, oh Kansans, oh people of a powerful legacy, that you will choose to continue to help in leading the way. Knowing that even here, sometimes we will get it wrong. Not simply because the winds won't be favorable, but because our shared aim will not be true. We'll select a stone for the appeal to the eye rather than the weight in our hands. Knowing also that each moment in history is an ask and an invitation and an urgency for us to declare ourselves. And as Unitarians, we have. Not all at once. Back in the era of Bleeding Kansas, Unitarianism was not sure if it was going to agree to be a thing, much less a shared abolitionist movement. But gradually, individually, like ripples on a pond, and then more and more, a shared identity then became clear. And we have carried and lived into and shaped it ever since. So many skipped stones launched in the name of a greater freedom, where eventually we have learned to act together, to say the words, because I am a Unitarian. For faith and for freedom. Onward. Amen. I invite you now to rise as you are able and join in singing I Wish I Knew How, a song about people trying to get free.
Say them loud, say them clear, for the whole world to hear. Say them loud, say them clear, for the whole world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart. Remove all the bars that can keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me, that you see and agree, everyone should be free. That you see and agree, everyone should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things I can do. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I'd sing
to be free. Then I sing 'cause I know how it feels to be free.
Recognizing that each moment is a starting anew, requiring of our best courage, our highest aspirations, and our deepest connections with one another. May we lean again toward the kind of freedom that brings everyone with us. May peace be with you.
He has a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works